So now we're here spreading awareness and opening up the conversation around Effexor because if there's one thing that I've learned through this journey, it's that there needs to be more information and more conversation around Effexor and this subject of antidepressants and what it really means to be on them and to come off of them. Welcome to Ebbs Flows with Erin. In this show, we're getting real about navigating the ups and downs of life together. I'm your host, Erin, and we're ditching the pressure to have it all figured out along the way because honestly, nobody does. We'll explore all things healing, growing, creating, and connecting. And if you deal with anxiety, depression, being a highly sensitive person, or just feeling overwhelmed by life sometimes, I see you, and this show is for you. My intention with these conversations is simple: to leave you feeling empowered, validated, and most importantly, reminded that you are never alone, no matter where you're at on your own journey. Learning that we all have the power to heal genuinely changed my life. And the best part, healing does not have to be complicated. The smallest changes really can make the biggest impact, and it can be joyful, fulfilling, and something that we do together. So join me in getting real about what it means to heal. Thank you for being here, and now let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to Ebbs and Flows with Erin. I'm your host, Erin, and I want to thank you for listening to or watching this episode. It's my first ever podcast episode, so I'm feeling excited, I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling all of the feels, but most importantly, I'm looking forward to opening up these conversations that we're going to have here. On that note, you can watch these episodes on YouTube at Ebbs and Flows YouTube channel or listen anywhere you listen to your podcasts. So I'm especially looking forward to opening up this conversation that we're starting off with because I felt called to start this podcast off with an Effexor series. So Effexor, if you are unfamiliar, although I'm sure if you're listening to or watching this episode, you're probably familiar with Effexor in some capacity, but if not, that's okay. Effexor is also known as Venlafaxine, and it is an SNRI antidepressant medication. So SNRI stands for serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. So this medication is working to increase the levels of serotonin and norepinephrine in our brains. It is said to improve mood and decrease levels of anxiety, and it's used to treat depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, and panic disorders. That felt like a lot of mumbo jumbo, but obviously important to start off with what Effexor is. So why am I talking about it? Well, I was on Effexor for 6.5 years. As of April 2024, I am Effexor free. So it is September 1st today. So I've been 4 months Effexor free, and this really is all in divine timing because it's actually 1 year ago on this day that I went to my doctor and told her I wanted to taper off of Effexor because I felt I was in an entirely different place in life than I was when I was prescribed Effexor many years ago. So now we're here spreading awareness and opening up the conversation around Effexor because if there's one thing that I've learned through this journey, it's that there needs to be more information and more conversation around Effexor and this subject of antidepressants and what it really means to be on them and to come off of them. I especially felt called to expand on this conversation because I started sharing some brief public videos about my experience on Effexor back in January of this year, so 9 months ago, and to this day I receive daily and weekly comments, messages, conversations surrounding this topic because people need more information. And I've been there. When I was in the thick of my tapering journeys, I had 3 failed tapering attempts before my 4th and final tapering journey brought me successfully off the medication and with far less debilitating withdrawal symptoms, which we're going to get into in part 3 of this series. I guess I should mention, how this series is going to be laid out. So this first part is just going to be kind of brief. Why am I talking about this? The number one thing I suggest you should consider and ask your doctor before committing to taking Effexor or really any medication. And briefly, my prescription experience. Part 2, we're going to get into the pros and cons of being on Effexor, again, in my experience and opinion. And part 3, we're going to explore tapering off of Effexor, the withdrawals, what you can expect, what I experienced in my 3 failed attempts, what didn't work for me, and what worked for me in my 4th tapering journey, and what exactly I did and how I did it, and how it came with, again, far less debilitating withdrawal symptoms. So my main goal in sharing all of this is that hopefully something that I share from my experience can be helpful to someone who might be on their own Effexor journey or is maybe at the stage of contemplating going to their doctor and exploring going on an antidepressant, or maybe you have a loved one who's on Effexor and you're curious about what they experienced or how you can support them. No matter where you're at in your journey, I want you to know you are never alone in your experiences. You're not crazy and you're not weak. No matter what point you're at in your journey, if you're watching this right now, I'm wearing my Not Alone sweater. It says not alone, it's okay to not be okay, and I strongly believe that. I know how scary it can feel to either just be in a place where you are contemplating going on an antidepressant, or you're on an antidepressant and you're dealing with side effects, or you're tapering your dosage down to be lower or to come fully off, and you're going through these crazy, wild, debilitating withdrawals. I know from these conversations I've been having that we all share in the experience of just wanting to have more connection and more access to more conversation and information around this subject. So that is what I'm hoping to offer with these conversations. I should note, if it's not obvious, I am not a doctor in any capacity, so anything I'm sharing here is strictly from my experience and it is not medical advice. I do believe it's very important to keep your doctor in the loop of what you're doing with your medication. And I also want to mention that if you're on Effexor or any sort of antidepressant medication and it's working for you and you have no intention of coming off, that is absolutely okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It does not make you weak. It is not wrong. That is okay. This is just simply my journey, and I'm hoping that in sharing it, someone can take something away from it that might be helpful to them in their own journey. But reality is, everyone's journey looks different, and while we're not alone, we also can't expect to live the same experience as everyone else, and that is a-okay. We're not meant to. So I just wanted to say that as well. Everyone is welcome here, and I'm really grateful for anyone who's listening. And if you have any questions or things you want me to talk about specific to Effexor on the podcast, or maybe want to discuss further about something, you can send me a DM at Ebbs Flows 222 on Instagram, or you can send me an email at Erin, ebbsandflows@gmail.com, and I am happy to continue this conversation with you. Okay, so in this episode, I just want to touch on the number one thing that I would suggest you ask your doctor when you're in that appointment and you're considering or exploring options of going on an antidepressant, because through the conversations I've been having and in my own experience, this is the one thing that we all kind of wish we would have asked our doctor instead of just going with whatever they gave us, which ended up being Effexor. But I also want to say that I understand and I empathize with the fact that a lot of the time, if you're in the position where you are considering going on an antidepressant, you probably just feel that you need and want help, and you're not really thinking about the future what ifs, or what if I want to come off one day, or what if side effects, blah, blah, blah. You're just like, I need something that helps make life feel more doable, and I need help. And so I totally understand that. Not everyone's going to want to or have the capacity to do their own research, explore options, etc., etc. But I do think asking this one simple question could maybe open up your doctor to giving you more options if they present you with Effexor or really any medication. But I'm talking specific to Effexor because that's my experience, and I know it's one of the most intense medications when it comes to side effects and withdrawals. So I would suggest asking, okay, so if and when I come to a point where I want to come off of this medication. What will that process look like and how could it affect me? Simple as that. I would just suggest asking your doctor that, see what they say. Who knows what they're going to say, because I know through conversations with my own doctor, she has told me we've been very transparent with each other through this journey of mine, with the fact that she wasn't really equipped with true tools to help with the withdrawal symptoms when it comes to tapering off medication. She was simply taught, okay, have them take the pill for 4 days in a row and then skip a day and do that for a few weeks and then go down and down and down. Outside of that, she's like, yeah, I'm glad that you are able to have conversations with other people and find alternative ways to tapering off that are less intense and less debilitating, because I'm not really aware of that. And crazy enough, she literally told me, which we're going to get all into all the details of this in part 3 about tapering off the medication and what worked for me and the fact that it came with far less withdrawal symptoms. But my doctor told me that she ended up actually telling colleagues and patients of hers about the method I used to successfully taper off with less symptoms, because she's like, people are so afraid of even attempting to come off the medication because of the horror stories of coming off. And I've never heard of this method that you used, but I can tell that it was slow and safe, and it's called the bead counting method. So again, I'm going to get into it fully in part 3, but if you want to look up the bead counting method, or if at the moment of this episode you're like, okay, I need to hear about this because I'm really struggling right now in my tapering journey, whatever it may be, search up the bead counting method, see what you can find, or again, like I said, you can send me a message. I'm happy to answer, but part 3 will be out 2 weeks from when this episode drops. So anyways, got a little off track here, but that is what I would suggest to ask your doctor. Just what will the process look like if I ever decide I want to come off this medication, and how could it affect me if you feel you have the capacity or interest in exploring other options. Okay, so my prescription experience, I'm just going to touch on briefly so that it leads us into the rest of the series and really the rest of this podcast, because after this Effexor series, I'm just going to dive into things that have brought me true, genuine healing and changed my life outside of medication. So we're going to get into it all, but my prescription experience started back in December of 2017. I actually have a journal entry that I look back at, and I think it's dated December 5th, 2017. And I wrote, "Today is a big day for me because I'm taking my anxiety seriously, and I'm going to be taking actions and steps to overcome the anxiety and not allow it to rule my life any longer." And wow, was it a lot longer of a journey than I ever suspected for me to actually overcome anxiety and not allow it to rule my life. We'll get into that. And at this point, I was not yet diagnosed with anything, so I was always cautious of using the term anxiety outwardly to anyone. I mean, in my journal, I would use it because, I was pretty sure that's what was going on with me, but I also just, in general, didn't really talk about anything I was experiencing at this point in life with anyone. And also, I remember at this time in 2017, it had almost become, trendy in a way to use the term anxiety or say, I have anxiety about this, whatever. And I remember being really conscious. I remember being really conscious of the fact that there's a difference between feeling nervous or feeling anxious even in moments and having an anxiety disorder. And I never wanted to discredit people who were diagnosed with anxiety disorders. So I just never talked about it with people because A, I didn't really open up like that to anyone at this point in life, and B, I didn't want to discredit anyone if that's not truly what I had because I didn't have a diagnosis. So, about 2 weeks after this journal entry, I go to my doctor and I tell her, I am struggling. I cannot sleep at all. My mind is racing constantly. I'm starting to have catastrophic intrusive thinking. My heart rate beats at 1,000,000 miles per minute. I get tight chest pain. I am constantly overwhelmed. It's all too much and I need help, especially because I was going into my 4th year of my business degree in January. And that on top of needing to be able to show up in every area of life, I was like, holy shit, I need something to help me get through and make life feel more easily doable because I need to graduate school and I don't want to feel this way anymore. So that's pretty much what I told my doctor, end of 2017. So it's January of 2018. She sends me to a psychiatrist and I do the written assessment, the verbal assessment. I think it was like a half-hour appointment. And then 2 weeks later, my doctor calls me into her office and I'm diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and moderate risk depression. And in the same appointment, my doctor prescribes me Effexor, aka Venlafaxine. And at the time, she actually prescribed me a secondary medication to go with it. It was something that was actually for seizures, but somehow helped with either anxiety or mood stabilization. I can't really remember. I was only on it for 6 months because at this time I was still on hormonal birth control and I started getting migraines with the aura. And long story short, something about migraines with the aura and hormonal birth control and this seizure medication altogether was dangerous. So we took me off that. And then a couple years later, I also got off of hormonal birth control. And that's a whole other conversation that I think needs to be had more about women's health, and that will be had on another day. But yeah, it's January 2018. I'm prescribed Effexor. I remember my doctor just saying, you might feel more anxiety and depression at first with taking this medication, but you just need to give yourself time to, let it settle in. And I remember I really didn't ask any questions, which for me now, over the years, I'm very proactive and, asking all the questions and very in tune. But I think it took this experience for me to become that way because I truly asked no questions. I was just like, heck yeah, something that's going to help me and ease this anxiety that I feel. And yeah, I don't recall being told anything about side effects or withdrawals aside from the fact that I would probably feel more anxiety and depression at first. And I ended up at 150 milligrams within the first 6 months of 2018. Over the years, by the time I started my tapering journey last year, I had been taking the lowest dosage, which was 37.5 milligrams for the past 3 years. So the first 3 years of my prescription, I was on 150 down to 75 and then 37.5 and then took that for the 3 years until I started tapering. So yeah, I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, moderate risk depression. Years down the road was diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm a highly sensitive person. So there's a lot going on up here, and I just want to normalize that and also spread the message of all the things that have actually brought me true, genuine healing and changed my life and have taken me from living in anxiety, fear, overwhelm, depression to ease, joy, abundance, flow. And of course, those more negative feelings are still going to come up. They're still going to be present in life. There has to be highs and lows in life, but that's what this podcast is about. We're navigating the ebbs and flows of life together. We're getting real about how to do so. And I hope you can take something from each episode of this podcast that hopefully makes you feel validated, empowered, and reminds you you're never alone in your experiences. And life gets to be fun. And we're going to be talking about a lot of serious stuff in this podcast, but we're definitely going to have fun along the way. We're in this together. So thank you for listening. I look forward to continuing this conversation in part 2 and 3 of this series. And I look forward to hopefully hearing from you at Ebbs and Flows 222 on Instagram, or send me an email at erinebbsandflows@gmail.com. Sending you lots of love and gratitude. See you next week.